Hello, welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your moderator. I'm also president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. And our guest this time, who's been our guest before, she's a delightful lady, is Rebecca Callen. She's our Auditor Controller. Now, the Auditor Controller, of all the different offices in county government, is the one most friendly to the taxpayer because she's watching out for our money. And so we want to be nice to this lady so we can be sure not to have any money wasted. Now, this particular session is different than the ones we had before. In this session, we'll be explaining the budget. This will be explaining the budget process. In a half hour, we can only do so much, but I think when you get done with this program, you'll have a better understanding of how the county budget works and what's happening. Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Rebecca. All right, I guess the first thing we want to talk about in the budget process is a mid-year. And what happens mid-year?
So mid-year is coming up very quickly, but the idea for mid-year is we are looking at that halfway point between July and June of the fiscal year and determining if we're on mark. So we will be closing, my office will be closing the December financial statements, and then we will start pouring through the information to determine if we are where we think we should be and if we think that's where we're going to land as of June 30th with revenues and expenditures. And based on that information, and we're kind of trying to look a little bit into like a crystal ball. So we're looking at historical information from July through December and trying to determine if that is likely to continue to occur. We're also looking at various information coming from the State Board of Equalization, other associations, reaching out to departments to see if they're hearing anything from their associations that might cause information to change. Projections to go up, projections to go down. And then we're presenting all that information in coordination with the administrative office to determine, is there any material changes that we need to take care of? Do we need to close any gaps? Because the budget is a living, breathing document. So it's not one of these items where you put it together in June, pass it so it's effective July, and then do final budget in September, stick it on a shelf, and don't look at it again. That's not what budget is. Budget is one of these constant documents that you have to monitor and look and determine, is everything where it's supposed to be.
So if it's discovered that there's not enough money, then you have to cut something or
So if revenues were not coming in, then it's trying to determine which revenues are falling short, and is there something that can operationally be done. Sometimes we'll find out it's a matter of one particular department or a couple of departments because of a staffing issue they just haven't been able to make their claims timely for grant reimbursements, or they haven't been able to get their billings out on time. And it could be just something very simple operationally. So then it's trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to get them back on track? And then we should be able to catch back up. Sometimes it will be where we find out that a revenue source completely outside of our control, because of a change at the state or federal government level, they've changed their process and something's not quite working, so they are not timely reimbursing us. So we might be claiming when we're supposed to, but they're not turning around and giving us the money that we're supposed to get. So in those particular cases, we know that the funds will be coming, but we just have to make note of that and make sure that the board understands why our revenues are down, but they're projected to continue to finish out strong. Sometimes we have good news, so I kind of look for kind of rays of hope in the budget with regards to revenue, and we will find unanticipated revenue or higher than anticipated revenue. And in those particular cases, that's good because we didn't expect that. And even better is if our expenses are lower, then it means potentially our cash carry will be a little bit higher than what we had projected. But it also could mean that it gives us additional resources resources to utilize between now and June. So if a department's revenue is coming in higher than they had projected, and they need to make a change with their staffing, or maybe they need to look at replacing a piece of equipment or anything like that, it's not going to be a burden on the general fund or on their fund balance. They actually will have the additional revenue resources in current year to pay for that. So we're kind of looking at all of those factors, and then administration would be bringing that information to the Board of Supervisors. That usually happens about in February. Is when you'll see that go before the Board of Supervisors. And in addition to that, my office is also projecting what we think cash carry is going to be. So where we think the entire budget, general fund specifically, is going to land as of June 30th of 2019. Oh my gosh, it's almost 2019. Of 2019. Because that is going to be indicative of making sure that that's our starting point for the 1920 budget.
Now, cash carry is the money that's left over that would go to the next budget cycle. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And you're not allowed to have a negative cash carry.
You cannot have a negative cash carry. So that is the importance of constant monitoring of the budget, constant monitoring of revenues. There's a lot more control under law for expenditures. Revenue is kind of on an honor system. And so because it's no system is really in place to budget check revenue, instead all of our systems are really in place to kind of give you not going to pay that bill in the system because you don't have enough appropriations.
Right.
We have to manually monitor revenues. So we're constantly doing that. And then if we see a problem, we have to deal with it. And mid-year is really the perfect point to do that because it gives us enough time to kind of come back if we've fallen a little bit.
Now, we're having some changes in personnel. And we're going to have a new CAO, and I'm wondering, with these changes, is there going to be disruption in the budget process, or how's that going to work?
Probably. Tim and myself we kind of worked in unison to get the budget done.
Right.
It was a lot of work to get OpenGov up and running, and I relied on him, and he relied on me quite a bit to get that done. So there definitely will be a disruption. I'm just not sure to the extent, but I wish him luck, and I totally understand that he's wants to spend more time with family. So good for him.
Yeah, I like him too. One of the things I liked about Tim was his positive attitude, and he was always solution oriented. And also, when he made mistakes, he admitted it. Mm-hmm. And you don't see that often. Now, I understand Manuel Lopez is going to be replacing him for a while until a new permanent person is hired. Have you worked with Manuel before?
I have worked with Manuel when he came back as the interim before Tim.
Yeah.
And he had hired some extra hire staff to come on board to help it was actually the same kind of time period because he had to work on mid-year then as well. And so again, it was a heavy reliance on my office to try to get through that. So I would anticipate that's probably, I would probably expect that he's going to be knocking on my door shortly.
Yeah, well, I suppose so. Now, is your department up to snuff in terms of having enough people to do the work? There was a time where you were trying to struggle with the shorthand people.
Yeah, we're still down one staff person, but we did. They are starting in January. So that will kind of give us some relief for sure.
Okay, that's good news. Now the next thing, I guess mid-year is what we're talking about. What happens now, and then the budget is actually fiscal, which means the end of June, beginning of July.
Correct.
So-
So what mid-year's importance is two things. Number one, mid-year is going to help us determine if we're on track for this fiscal year based on what our projections were. So based on the plan that was adopted in September. And, again, my office is constantly monitoring the budget, and we're constantly reaching out to departments to say, hey, what's going on with this? Or did you forget something about that? Or, and we're working with administration to try to isolate some of those issues. But mid-year is kind of that really all-encompassing look at everything as much as we possibly can with a fine-tooth comb to see if there's really any issues that we need to deal with. But if there are significant issues, mid-year is not only the time that I'm projecting cash carry for the following budget cycle, it's also the period of time where if we have operational issues or some certain funding is going to cease to happen going forward and we find out about it now,
Right.
it's the opportunity for everyone to regroup.
Right.
Because we may have to change things organizationally, structure-wise. There might have to be changes in departments or different types of staffing. It could also be the time where we find out new funding is going to be coming down the pipeline. And if that's the case, it takes so long to hire employees, you almost have to start thinking about that now
Right.
in order for it to be in place for July. So this is kind of the time where we regroup, re-strategize, get prepared for the next budget cycle, and then cut off anything that is becoming an issue now before it's too late.
Now, if a taxpayer wanted to find out more information about the budget, is there a place they can go? Is there on the website?
So the entire budget with regards to what was adopted in September is on my website, along with all prior year budgets, I think, that go
Okay.
back to, I have no idea when, but many, many years of final budgets. We are still working on the OpenGov platform for public portal, and that is not completely out there yet. It's still in the process of being tested. So that's the one thing that Tim was working pretty diligently on, that public portal part. So hopefully we can continue to move forward on that, but it might be shelved a little bit until we get a permanent CIO on. But that really will be helpful because I can show you where the document is on my website and you can look for it and search through it and find what you want. But it's that standard state controller format that every county in the state of California has. And it's just not very intuitive. So you kind of have to really understand what you're looking for and understand how to look at it in order to make any sense of a document that large. OpenGov is going to give kind of a more layman's look at the budget and at activity. And so that will be a lot better platform for people to look at, but we're not quite there yet.
Now, does OpenGov or the budget actually go drill down far enough so where people can see what the salaries are of all the people that are being hired?
You will see the budgeted and actual salary on an expense level. You won't see it by employee.
Okay.
You're not going to see it by vendor. So you're not going to actually be able to drill down and see how much was spent with vendor XYZ or how much did John Smith get paid last month. But you would be able to see how much has the Auditor Controller's office spent on permanent salaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
In other words, you can find out information on a class of employees.
A class. I'm not sure if it's going to be by bargaining unit or anything like that. We're not quite there yet, but that's something that we're working through.
You know, there's a Supreme Court decision recently, and where the Supreme Court said that public employees cannot be forced to join a union, and the unions cannot take money away from them without their permission. And has that any effect in our county? Do you know?
Well, with the passage of the legislation that Governor Jerry Brown passed,
Right.
which precludes us from having those discussions with any represented employees,
Right.
it's really up to the unions to have that discussion with their with their union members, and the county cannot have those discussions.
Now, I understand that the employer or the county cannot communicate with the employees on something that the union may not agree with.
Correct.
Now, does that also mean that it cannot communicate with the public in general?
We can't have any discussions that would give the
That's a hard one.
to give the perception that we're having discussions with union members.
Okay. Well, one of the problems that our taxpayers see is unfunded liabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad to say, but a good deal of the cause of this is organized labor. They have put pretty strong pressure on increasing the benefits beyond what inflation is, or what the competitive picture would be. In other words, the taxpayers do want to see wages and benefits be such that they would attract good people and keep good people. And this is a benefit to the taxpayer. But when this compensation would go beyond that, it seemed like it'd be a waste of public money.
Yeah.
And would not be fair to the taxpayer. And so we're kind of happy that if the employees have the power not to be forced to join a union, could result in better communication. We think it's a good thing, because the more sunshine, the better. But if it's resulting in secrecy and darkness, we're not happy with that. we would like to see as much sunshine. Incidentally, you mentioned OpenGov, and this seems to be an attempt to make the budget more understandable to the taxpayer and the public. And now, how does OpenGov differ from the former format?
So the former format is really it's a PDF document, right? It's a I don't know how many pages it is now, but it's hundreds and hundreds of pages of narrative and state prescribed schedules of information. And so it's not interactive. Right? So if you wanted to know, well, how much did the county spend on what kind of the normal layman person would think of law enforcement this year compared to last year, you would have to really look for that information and try to add up all the numbers in the current format, because it's in a document and you could figure it out, but you have to know where to look.
Right.
In OpenGov, because it's just one gigantic database that has kind of a more user-friendly, intuitive front end, you would have a much easier time to drill down to that type of information very, very quickly. And so whether you're looking for, what's been the historical contribution to the library system, or how much has been spent on animal services over the last, so many years. As we continue to get more and more information in the OpenGov platform, there will be more and more historical comparisons that people will be able to look at. You'll be able to compare actual information, budgeted information. You'll be able to compare salary costs by department or kind of by service function. So whether it's law enforcement or general administration or legislation type type classifications.
What about like a bulldozer operator? Would you be able to know what a bulldozer operator is being paid?
At this point, that's not something that we have in OpenGov, but the reality is if you go to the county website right now and you go to HR's website, they do have the salary schedule on there and all that information is on there.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Now, in OpenGov, do they have charts where you could see whether things are being increased or decreased?
Yes. So it's just it's a really nice platform, and it's a lot easier for most people to look at. I mean, I can look at our document and I know exactly what I'm looking for, and I know exactly how to read it, and I know how to put it together and find what I need. That's not I'm not normal. So that's not how most people.
Well, you're exceptional.
I'm exceptional. I like numbers. So, it would be hard for the average person to be able to do that quickly, where OpenGov is a platform where it makes it just a lot more intuitive and it's a lot less kind of cumbersome to try to get that information.
Right. It seemed like one of the things that Tim Litz has done is increase communication between the departments and orientation where the departments are more working together. And I think he had a seminar or a conference for that. And I was really impressed. Because that's good for the taxpayer. That means we don't have people working against each other, and we get better result. And so I'm looking ahead. I assume that same process will be working or is working in this the budget cycle, where the departments are not only looking at their own budgets, but also they're in a relation with other departments.
We try. So, so part of the budget process also is when we compile, because the largest expense in any budget is personnel. Right. So one of the first things that we have to do is put together personnel cost forecasting, and so that was the lovely project I worked on for a very long time last budget. But so I'm hoping we have a better platform for this one. But what happens is we release that information probably in March, or around March, and then departments can start building their budget around that projected salary picture, based on what we know, based on the current personnel that they have, based on what's already been contractually negotiated, based on expenses that we know are going to happen, whether it's CalPERS increases or whatever it is. And then they kind of formulate their budget around there. We start having meetings with them in April and May. And we go through their budget and we kind of do dissect their budget a little bit to say, well, where is this, coming from? And, did you have a discussion with this department or that department? Because this seems like a fee that the two of you share. Did you have a conversation about looking at the fee, if it is too high, too low, just right? Is there, something that needs to be looked at? So I think sometimes people, it just depends on the time of year and it depends on the staffing levels. If they're so busy just trying to get their work done, sometimes they do forget to have those conversations before we sit in the room for budget. But we do try to remind them to do that. So they'll kind of regroup and go have those conversations and then come back and go, oh, yeah, we forgot about that one piece. But we do try to advocate for that regularly.
I understand that the maybe some good revisions to the TOT tax might be coming that has to do with nonprofit groups and maybe hospitals and rehab and other places where people will stay for less than a month, where now they could be forced to pay a tax.
They could be. The ordinance is very old with TOT, so that is something that desperately needs to be rewritten. So that's something that we definitely recognize needs to be addressed.
Well, the taxpayers really applaud that.
Yeah.
And So looking ahead, what do you see in this next budget cycle? What should we be alert to?
So I think if anyone was paying attention in September when the board adopted that budget, I did make very strong comments that while this budget is balanced, there still are structural deficiencies with it. We still have expenditures that are outpacing revenues. We still need to look at what are some options there, and I made it very clear it's not one thing that we have to look at.
Right.
And I said, the moment this budget gets adopted, we have to start working starting tomorrow, to start finding solutions for these gaps.
It's a living, breathing.
It's a living and breathing thing, and there are some operational things that have to occur. And TOT did happen, but do recall that the board was very clear that the increase in TOT is divided. Is divided in
3 parts.
Well, the Calaveras Visitors Bureau,
Right.
Public Works, Fire Departments, and the Sheriff's Department. So it's 4.
4 parts, okay.
So as far as I'm aware, we are the only county who has actually given up any portion of our Prop 172 money to fire districts, and the only county that I'm aware of that gave up a portion of their TOT to fire districts. All the other counties that have it, it stays with the county. It stays with the county jurisdiction, and it goes to fund the Sheriff's Department and roads. So that is a little bit different than other counties, but we're not going to see that much revenue coming in from TOT that's specifically going to go to the Sheriff's Department. So it does help, but we have a lot more work to do. So I just, the board needs to remember, and the next CAO needs to remember, we're not out of the woods. We still have the same structural gaps that we did when the budget was adopted in September. And even though we, did receive that PG&E settlement, and even though we did, get some good things happening, we still have to make some changes.
What was the amount of that PG&E settlement? Do you remember?
What
roughly.
comes to the county was $20 million.
Okay. Now, was that $20 million? It couldn't have been budgeted because you didn't know what it was.
We didn't budget, no.
So it's almost like cash carry?
It is in its own fund. And I want it to be very clear. I spent 25% of my time for over 2 years trying to get that. So it was specifically to pay for road repairs and recovery due to Butte Fire.
Yeah.
It was to pay for our costs that we incurred over from 2015 through present day. It was to pay for some mitigation issues that we were exposed to during those emergencies, whether it was winter storm or Butte Fire or things that we're seeing that are happening in other counties. It's not like we had a wealthy aunt who passed away and left us some money. So I hope that it's remembered what its purpose and intent was for,
Yeah.
and that it's not a lottery win.
Oh, okay. Well, this has been very, very informative, and I really appreciate you being our guest.
Thank you.
And we want to really thank you for watching, and we hope that you found this rewarding and informative. We'll see you next time.